Good afternoon, and thank you for joining this learning webinar. I'm going to talk about something that you're probably familiar with in Excel, and that's called pivot tables. Now, pivot tables are a great feature in Excel. Why? Well, first of all, they allow us to analyze our data in a much more effective and powerful way. In fact, before pivot table came out, which was a long time ago, we had to analyze our data via filtering and advanced filtering. So along comes pivot tables, and many users that I have spoken to over the decades have created all kinds of pivot tables. However, there's a chance they may not know the features that I'm going to show in this video. And I'm going to show a bunch of them. So grab your hats, grab your popcorn, and get ready to learn some fun things about Microsoft Excel pivot tables. So let's take a look at this first data list here. By the way, it is a table. I converted it into a table. The way we do that is we hold down the Control key, press the letter T, and that will allow us to bring it into table format. And there are a lot of advantages of that, which I don't have enough time to go into on this video. So I always like to take a look at the column headers, which are the fields that are going to be used for the pivot table report. You can see them on row 1. So how easy is it to create a pivot table? You may or may not know. We go to the Insert tab, click on Pivot Table, and I want to put it into a new sheet, and it will be inserted right in front of the sheet where this list is. So I click OK. Now, we have a blank sheet. Over here on the left, we have to build the pivot table report. And we do that by dragging these fields over here in the pivot table field list into what I call the quadrants. I call them quadrants because there's 4 of them. Now your layout may look a little different than mine. I actually like this layout. I clicked on the little gear and I chose the second one. The reason I like this is because there may be times when you have a data table that has more fields that can fit in the panel here. So I like to see them side by side. And again, these are called quadrants. Each quadrant has an icon next to it. Filters, looks like a little funnel, just like in data filtering. Rows and columns look similar. A field that's in the rows quadrant will have the data going down rows in column A to begin with. And then data in columns will go across columns. And then we put our values. That's the numeric values. That's where the Greek summation icon is, into this quadrant. And then we get a pivot table report. It's that easy. So I'm going to start off by talking about a feature called grouping. You may or may not be aware of it. And the goal here in this video, in this first part of the video, is to extract the month and the year from each transactional date, as well as we can manually group them together if we wanted to. That was painful and slow. So like I said, the grouping feature is a lot better. We're going to group by order date, by month and years, and then put our sales field in the total sales for each month and year. So here we go. Doesn't matter what order you do it in. I'm going to drag the sales field first. There's the magic number, 32,064,000. And now I'm going to grab the order date field and put it into rows. Here we go. Now you can see, as I mentioned, it's multiple years. And I mentioned I want to be able to group this report into years and quarters. I'm sorry, month and years. So how do I do that? What we do is I bring my mouse. Let me expand one of the data areas so I can actually see one of the records. I right click on any one of these and I choose the group command. The dialog box comes up called grouping. Now, it's smart enough to know that the beginning date was January 3rd of 2012 and it ends January 1st, 2015. In other words, all of 12, all of 2013, all of 14. And you can see that right here. Now, as I mentioned, you can see here that it's by months and years. That's what I want. I could change this if I wanted to, and I'll do that in a later part of the video. But right now, I just want it to have this look. So what do? I'll click OK. Now, if your quarters field automatically came up highlighted, you will need to just hold down the Control key and deselect it. The reason mine didn't come up highlighted already is because I already went through this prior to the video, and it remembered my grouping settings. So here we go. Ooh, look at that. Just like that, I can see a breakdown by month for each year of sales. Wow. If we didn't know the grouping feature in pivot tables, what you were doing is creating all kinds of formulas and using the grouping feature in Excel, which is okay, but like I said, it was laborious and painful. All right, just to clean this up a little bit, I want dollar signs with no decimal places for all the numbers. So there's multiple ways of doing it. You can go over here, right? I just like right-clicking. I right-click on one of the numbers, but I don't do format cells. If I chose format cells, it will only change that one cell. I want to change the entire report. So therefore, I have to go to number format. Change it to currency, 0 decimal places. I click OK, and there we go. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is very similar to what I showed you before, but how about if someone comes along and says, you know what, that's a great pivot table report where it's broken down by month per year. I'd like it to be broken down by week. Ooh, is that possible? Absolutely. And again, we're going to implement the grouping feature within the pivot table. So here we go. Again, similar data. I didn't mention, by the way, it's got about 570 some records in it, so it's not big at all. So here's the data. And you can see it. So what I'm going to do is similar as last time. I'm going to right click. I'm going to choose group. Notice now, again, the grouping dialog box comes up, but I don't want to be grouped by month or years anymore. How do I do it if I want it by weeks? I don't see weeks in here. Well, here's how you do it. You deselect the ones that are highlighted, like I just did. Turn on days, and then choose number of days, 7. That's how many days are in a week. And then when I click OK, the data is grouped by weeks. Is that cool? Or is that cool? But you notice it says January 3rd to January 9th. Well, watch this. When I bring up the calendar for the year 2012, January 3rd was not on a Monday. It was on a Tuesday. Oh boy. Where are you going with this, Tom? You guessed it. Later on, I will show you how to make sure that this grouping begins on Mondays. Wow. All right. We'll show you that in a little bit. By the way, there it is, January 12th. I'm sorry, January 2012, the 3rd is a Tuesday, 2nd is a Monday. Here, it's going from Tuesday to Tuesday. All right, so we'll fix that. But that's pretty cool though, isn't it? You got a weekly breakdown of all your data. And then I would just do the format again if I needed to. So how do we fix it? Well, to fix it, you can see here, I've got my grouping dialog box back again, and I deselect the existing options, grouping options. I single click on days like I did before, and you'll see, based on the data, starting on January 3rd, 2012, which we know is a Tuesday. Well, I want to uncheck that. And then I do want it to end January 1st, 2015. But again, by not starting on the 3rd, Excel is smart enough to know that I need to, well, actually I need to set the starting date to be the 2nd. So I changed the 3 to a 2, and Excel will know that it's a Monday. When I click OK, and then group it, as you can see here, I have the days option set for grouping. Number of days, 7, because I'm still interested in a week. I changed the date to January 2nd, 2012. Make sure these boxes are checked. when I click OK, you can see there it is, January 2nd to January 8th. Again, let me just go back into the grouping dialog box, and you can see here it reverted back to January 3rd. However, when I went through the steps, this is checked and this is changed to January 2nd. And it's set to 7 days. And you can see that it worked. That's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Because someone may come along and say, hey, I want it to precisely be Monday, beginning of the week, not just a random date. Okay, so let's move along. The next thing I'd like to show you, well, actually, you know what? I can just right click, change the formatting, currency, 0 decimal places, and it looks a little cleaner. There we go. By the way, if you don't want your auto grouping to take effect, in Excel 2016, a new feature came out where automatic grouping was enforced. Well, if you want to do it manually, which will speed up very large data lists, data tables, you would go to File, Options, go to the Data category, which is right here, and then you would look for this option right here that says Display Automatic Grouping of Date and Time Columns in Pivot Tables. You would check that, and that would disable automatic grouping. Mine is unchecked because I don't have very large lists to work with in my video examples. All right, so there I grouped by dates. Let's talk about grouping by simple sales ranges. Let's see how we would do that. So you can see what I did here is I dragged the sales field first into the rows quadrant. Previous parts of this learning video, you saw me always drag it into the values quadrant. Now, let's group this first. So now what it looks like when I have grouping on a numeric field, it looks at all the values and it breaks it down. This is the default, but I can change it if I wanted to, which I don't. I do want it to be in increments of 10,000, maxing out at 100,000, and beginning with 10,000. And there you go. You see it right there. But I could change this if I wanted to. Now I'm going to drag the sales field into the value areas twice. And I'll explain why. You'll see that the first function is count. Now I'm going to drag sales again. And you can see count, but I want the first one to be sum function, not count. So I click on the drop-down arrow next to the field, and I go into value field settings, ... which means a dialog box comes up with further instructions. I simply change it to the sum function, click OK, and just like that. I now have a breakdown very easily where I can see how many times, and I can sort on this, right click, sort, large to small, that the most times that there were sales between 70,000 and 80,000. It was 71 times. The least amount of times that there have been sales in this particular range between 20,000 and 30,000 is 58 times. So you get the idea right here. So isn't that a great thing? We can now analyze the data that's based on grouped sales figures. And again, you can see that the sales in the group between 10,000 and 20,000, which is right there, there were 66 sales transactions that added up to $991,000. And the most, as we can see right here, is between 70 and 80,000. Now, the highest amount of sales is this range right here, between 90 and 100,000. And if I want to sort that again, I can just right-click, choose sort, high to low. There you go, right there. That's not the number of items. That's not the number of total sales for that range, but it's sales. So we can analyze both at the same time. Let's move along. We're going to now group by text. I think you're going to like this one. So you can see right here that I now have a pivot table report that's breaking down by region, sales region. And there's the sum of the sales for each region. And again, that magic number is 32,064,000. Well, I would like to group this report. So how do I do that? Well, let's group Africa and Europe together. So to do that, I'm going to single click on the Africa row. I'm going to hold down the Control key and click on Europe. Just those two. Now I right click on either of those and I choose group. And when I do, you can see that I now have 3 groups. And that again is because bringing back to the sheet with all the data, you can see in column D, the sales region. It's got Americas, Europe, and then Asia, and then Africa. All right, so I'm also letting you know that we can rename the labels if we don't like what it calls it. For example, I'm going to rename Group 1 and call that East. And I'm going to call that Central. Now, I've got the Americas, and I want that to be labeled as West. And then I want the Asia group to be called East. So this is, again, just letting you know that you can come up with your own customized grouping names. Now what I want to do is I want to rename this Sales Region 2 and rename it and call it New Regions. So I clicked on the drop-down arrow. I then went to Field Settings. And right up here is where I can just rename it. New Regions. Click OK. And you can see it here in the quadrant. It's been renamed. Now, you can now see that all the groups now are set with names of regions. I'll just take this a step further, and what I'll do is I will take the New Regions field out of rows and make it into the columns. And watch what it does to the data. It's still the same number, but it just be able to analyze it a little bit differently. All right, thought you would like that. So that is how we can create groups in our pivot tables based on text. So if you remember earlier on in this video, we showed you how to do grouping on the sales by individual months. Well, how about if someone comes along and says, I want it to be grouped by half years. So we have multiple years of data and we want it to be grouped for every 6 months, half a year. Can we do that? Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is show the sales that are going to be grouped January to June and then July to December. So as you can see, to start off, I took the sales month field and dragged it into the rows quadrant. And you can see in column A, all the rows from January through December. So the next thing I'm going to do is only highlight January through June. I click and I drag like that. You know me, I like to right click. I choose group and it's automatically grouped. And then I do the same thing from July to December. Highlight the 6 months, right click, group. Now I want to rename this so that it is a little bit more meaningful. So I'll click right here where it says Group 1 and I'll rename it First Half. Then I'll do the same thing over here and call this Second Half. By the way, notice that a new sales month number 2 was created because this contains our new half-year groupings. Well, we don't need the sales by month anymore, so I'm going to delete the sales by month field and drag it out of the quadrant. That's how you delete it. Now, I'm going to put the sales value field into the values quadrant. Look at that. Isn't that a great thing? It's beautiful. Then what I did is I took the financial year field and dragged it into rows, but I put it above the sales month 2. Because now you can see broken down by years, 12, 13, and 14. and each of those years have the two halves of data. Now, conversely, I could have switched it around, which I just did, and had the financial year below the sales month number 2, and this is what it looks like. Same numbers, slightly different way of analyzing it. I'll bring it back. And there we go. Now we have our pivot table that's grouped by half years. Pretty cool. Well, how about if we want to create a similar pivot table by grouping, but choose our own specific custom dates? Can we do it? Absolutely. The example is going to be data for the year 2014 from January 1st only till September 30th. Stay tuned. So what I did here is I dragged the order date field into the rows quadrant. And now what I need to do is when I group, I want to make sure that only months are selected and not quarters and years. Because then when it's months only, we can then define our own custom range. As I mentioned, I want it to be from January 1st, 2014 to September 30th, 2014. So I changed the date. /30/14. I click OK. Look at that. Now it's smart enough to know that there's data that's outside of that range and it's lumped together. Well, it'll help if I put the sales field in, wouldn't it? There we go. And I could just hide this row if I wanted to. Right click, hide. And I could do the same thing for anything after September 30th, 2014. And that's only the data that I want. Now you'll notice though, when I did that, that still magic number of 32 million is there. So there's a feature that we can use to get around that, which I talk about in another video. We talk about aggregate function. So just be careful about that. Hiding may not be the best. You may just want to take the data and maybe copy and paste it into a separate sheet. So let me undo those two commands. And I would just do a copy and a paste elsewhere just to show what those breakdowns are for those 9 months. So as you can see, you can ask me a question about pretty much any Microsoft Office program that's out there, including Microsoft Windows. And you can also see I'm your person to go to if you want to learn how to incorporate AI Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, inside your spreadsheets, presentations, documents, emails, and Teams platforms as well. Am I an expert at any of these? Probably not, but I know a heck of a lot more than you do, probably. My rates are reasonable. Reach out. I'll be more than happy to help you in order for you to work smarter, not harder. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.